Right, I think we are live.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, if you are, in fact, joining us. I am Kimberly Godbolt from Talented People, which is well, most of you already know, is a staffing company and headhunting company, and we hook the best people up for the best jobs, effectively. And whilst we are all sitting at home, rather stuck in our current situations, Rosie, my partner at Talented People, and I thought it would be an amazing opportunity to pool our great wealth of people and their knowledge and just chat really informally and nicely about things that might be informative and interesting and perhaps even a bit escapist for us all right now. I know a lot of you have lost contracts and jobs or are just desperately trying to make your work happen wherever you are. And we just thought it would be nice a couple of times a week to get a good group of people together who can impart some sort of wisdom about some sort of subject that would be of value to you guys and that you could think about while you're perhaps taking a bit of time to take stock on the career and the world and everything. So I am very lucky today to be joined by Arron Fellows, who is exec and creative director of Mindhouse Productions, which is the production company he and Louis Theroux have set up together. And he has exec lots of Louis projects over the years, as well as other things that may not have been quite as high profile, including with me. And Joyce Trozzo, who is a director of many, many years and many, many films, many of which were with Stacey Dooley. She's also worked with other high profile talent along the way too, but we thought there was an interesting pairing because both Arron and Joyce are super experienced at working with one well-known name over many films. So I'm sure they've got a lot of very interesting things to tell us about how that works, you know, the collaboration process, whether one person leads and the other doesn't, or just how that works, and you know, if there are differences of opinion, how those play out, and how best to make the most out of the talent on screen. So first up, guys, hello, and thank you for coming.
Hello.
Thank you for asking.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so nice to do this. Tell us about your current situations. Joyce, what's happening with you in terms of coronavirus isolation? What's going on with you?
Well, I was just about to start a project for BBC Current Affairs where it would presenter led with a reporter, a quite high profile reporter, and we were supposed to be going to Europe at the end of April. And as soon as it hit Italy, I thought, I don't think that's going to happen. And but we just carried on, and then I think it was last Monday. Was it last Monday? I don't know. We've lost track of time. And I got the call that it had been deferred for 3 months. Oh, wow. And I thought, wow. I thought to myself, for the first time, because as a freelancer, you get a lot of time in between contracts, but for the first time, I've got time without feeling guilty, and I can do all the things that I want to do without having to look for work, without thinking about work. And actually, I haven't watched any telly. I have switched off. I'm meditating, spending a lot of time indoors. I didn't leave the house for 7 days, you know, so I would say it's been positive. It's been positive.
That's really interesting to hear. I think it's a lot of it is mindset, isn't it? As long as we're healthy, a lot of it is mindset. I know a lot of freelancers out there are struggling with the idea of not having work and obviously the financial implication of that, but it's one way to think about it, is to take stock. And Arron, what's the situation with you? Are you still working?
Yeah, I'm still working at the moment, but we've Louis and I have got a company now, so we're making programs with him, but we were kind of a day away from flying to the States for a new series, and that got pulled. So that is, you know, I don't know what's going to happen with that. We would like that to happen at some point, but we don't know anything. So it's actually really hard to plan. And I think generally, just through my friends, through colleagues, anyone who was doing any kind of filming, all that has just gone. Some people have been able to get into edits, which it seems that those programs are still being made remotely, but the vast majority of work has just fallen through at a time, I think, when everyone expects March and April to be the times where you're just about to embark on your project for the year or whatever it might be, and now that has gone. So kind of I have a lot of sympathy for those, especially who maybe haven't worked yet this year, who've been waiting for their first thing to come along.
Yeah, that was me.
The winter has been hard. Was that you, Joyce?
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, I'd been waiting. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I had. But I do think that they are looking at a lot of archive-based programs and user-generated content. So I have been asked to do some development and look for some user-generated content. So I think it's about shifting and changing the way we look at how we make TV at the moment. So I think I know that people are still pitching and they're doing big things. It's just about shifting how we do it.
Yeah, that's what we're finding. We still have work on. Our clients are just thinking quick and fast. Some obviously have had big blows and commissions fall down or things postponed, but a lot of them are also thinking, okay, let's get over the shock of this. What can we make? People need to watch telly or need to watch online stuff. So, you know, where do we go from here? So it's just, I think, everyone getting their heads around it and trying to find a new way of working.
Yeah, I think it will, and I think it will happen. I mean, this year there was meant to be the Olympics, the Euros. I mean, that must be hours and hours and hours of TV, which is missing. So I think people are going to have to think about different ways of doing it, because we don't know how long this is going to go on for.
Yeah. So on that note, I mean, you obviously, Joyce, you're looking for your next thing, or you're going to wait for your next thing. Arron, you're currently working with Louis. Should we start with you, Arron? I know everyone will be really interested to know, what was the first project you did with Louis, and how did it go initially?
Well, it's a bit of a weird one, Louis, because he works differently to, I think, other talent. So there are other talent in the land who might be, maybe they are kind of linked to one company, but different people might be able to pitch. They might do it project by project. Traditionally, Louis signed up to deals over a number of years, and so he has a team which runs and develops his stuff for him all the time. So it's not that lots of different people are trying to pitch. It's just one core team who are just working on the Louis programs all the way through. So I've been working on a program called The Met Police in London at BBC Studios, which I've been doing for about 15 months or something. And I was asked if I was interested in working with Louis. And so I said, yes, of course, I would be interested. And then I got a phone call from the then series producer, Jamie Pickup, who said, I'm leaving this job. Are you interested in my job? And I said, yeah, I'd be interested in the job. But I'd not really worked with talent that much before. I think I'd done one thing. And then I met Louis in a coffee shop, and we had a chat, and I kind of suddenly was working with him. And the first program I worked with him on was Talking to Anorexia, which was already in production. So it had started already. Eleanor Wood, who was the director, had already started filming it. But actually it gave me an opportunity to kind of observe how things worked. And my exec at the time was Peter Dale, one of the kind of great Gandalf figures of television. And I said to him really early on, I said, how do I do this job? Like, what am I meant to do? And if anyone has ever worked with Peter in the past, you'll kind of understand his answer. And he just said, give it 5 months and you'll work it out. And he was actually pretty right. About 5 months later, I thought, I think I know what I can do.
It must be a very difficult point at the beginning, not difficult, but a sort of a point at the beginning. Someone is already very well established and well known, but you have your own ideas about how you want to do something, and you've got to work out how those two marry up.
Yeah, I think Louis asked me right originally, what do I think I could bring to it, which is a really kind of difficult question to answer, isn't it? And I think what I said was I love to see actuality playing out, and I'd like to see more actuality play out. that was kind of it, really. There was no more to it than that, because, you know, he's someone who's obviously made, I think he's made like 65 hours of programs or something now. So I'm not going to come and reinvent the wheel. All you can do is kind of think, well, I'm interested in some subjects. I think he might be good at this. And actually, by pure accident, it was just one of those chance things. It wasn't part of my, I never kind of planned to work with Louis. It wasn't on a kind of list of things I wanted to do. And actually what I discovered was what great opportunities there are when you work with talent, how you can explore subjects which might not get commissioned through other means. It gets you very quickly into subject matters. You can get to the heart of things very quickly. And for me, when I think a lot of people might be resistant to working with presenters, but actually your actuality is that presenters encounter with their contributors. And when you've got someone who's really at the top of their game, which Louis is, which Stacey is, I think often you can just press record and watch it go. And actually you're not there saying, oh, can you ask this question? Can you ask that question? You're kind of filming this unfolding encounter. So
are you saying it's basically really easy?
in some ways it's got its benefits. I just know that there are those, it's not easy, of course it isn't easy, but there are those though that what I think there's a natural as a director, you kind of want to kind of get control on your documentaries, don't you? And you think, I want this to happen and I'm in charge and I'm going to do this. You have to let some of that go, sometimes a lot of that go with presenters, because some of the best things, I've worked on 8 Louis, I think now, and the best things are obviously the things which have got often nothing to do with how you're directing, how you're filming it. It's just the things that happen through those people's encounters. And so actually, to cut a long story short, it's about collaboration.
Yeah.
How do you feel, Joyce? So when did you first start working with Stacey, and had you done presenter-led documentaries before that?
I had done in my early career, I'd done a few like VT inserts with reporters, and I think without going into that too much, I just learned my very first role with a reporter is I had a whole crew and a reporter, and I just learned to follow my instincts, and I had to challenge the reporter on my first directing day, and he wasn't happy, but afterwards he came and said, you were right to push me. And I thought, good, I've got it. But anyway, and then I did a lot of obs docs, which like Arron, it was a lot of actuality, filming police and stuff like that. And then I got the opportunity to work with Stacey, and I'd been desperate to move into current affairs. So this was an investigative pilot for current affairs, BBC Three, and it was called The Truth About Magaluf. And
what is the truth about Magaluf?
Well, my executive producer at the commission at the BBC was Fiona Campbell, and I had never done a full hour presenter led or anything. I had worked with celebrities on stuff, immersive stuff, and she just said that I want to go down some dark alleys, and I thought that's right up my street. And obviously I later discovered it's also up Stacey Street, but a bit like Arron, it's an absolute collaboration, because I think as a director you have to sort of know, it's not rocket science, but I'm sure for a lot of young directors watching, each scene you have to know what is feeding into, so you have an arc. It's really, that's you know what the message is. Why are you making this film? And each scene feeds into an arc, and you want each scene to be different and develop the story. So as long as you've got a structure, I think that's really important when you're working with presenters. So Stacey and I went to Magaluf, and we were filming with the police, the ambulance, and when we say dark, you know, I filmed with the mortuary, and what we were looking at the impact of tourism. This is young people, their first holiday on their own, cheap and cheerful, Spain. What's the impact of all the alcohol? And we were looking at the deaths, the prostitution, the robberies, and so that's what we did. And it was a pilot, and it was trending when it went out on Twitter. So obviously there was a series commissioned. So obviously Stacey and I, because it did well, we ended up making more films together, and I think we've made 7 since then. And I think it's definitely a collaboration, because with Louis and with Stacey, it's their names in the title and it's them in front of the camera, and so they have to have a voice. It has to be true and authentic to them, because it is their journey, and especially when they're investigative. So you have to give them a voice. But as a director, as long as you've done all the work before you get there, you've got a structure which helps them to feel safe, because if you don't have a structure, then they'll start taking over and they might not necessarily know what they're doing. Because the thing about TV, it is a team effort, because if presenters worked on their own, we wouldn't be with them, they'd be with the cameraman. Same with editors, we wouldn't have a director sitting with an editor. It has to be collaborative. So I think
you have to trust each other as well. There sounds like there's a huge amount, especially when you're investigating very journalistic and potentially sensitive subject matters. They need to know from you where they can go and how far they can go.
Yeah, exactly. And that's absolutely, but what I discovered about Stacey on that first shoot was her work ethic. She's an incredibly hard worker. So we gave up our days off. We were working around the clock. And on that shoot, I had a cameraman. Obviously later on I self-shot a lot of them, but he would do his 11 hours and then he'd be, right, I've got to go. So I'd say to Stacey, shall we go out with the police tonight? Shall we go out with the ambulance tonight? She'd say yes. And so I think I've been lucky enough to work with people that want to make the best film possible, and then they trust me and I have to trust them as well. Yeah.
So Arron, after you had your first 5 months, says Peter Dale, of getting your head around working with Louis, how did you sort of stick with him? I mean, obviously you worked well together, but most people would then go off and do other projects. Why do you think that happened? And then how do you think your relationship with him and the way you work changed, if it did, over the course of the next few films?
I think the Talking to Anorexia experience was a good one, because we worked together more so in the edit, and I think we just got to know each other's, how we worked, at each other's strengths and weaknesses. At the same time, we were developing a new series for the States, because we knew Louis was about to go back to LA, because he's a dual citizen, so he can jump between the US and the UK traditionally. And we knew
I didn't know that.
Yeah, his dad's American. So so we were planning to go back to LA, and we were just looking at stories around there. And ultimately, we ended up moving out there. So actually, I moved out for about 5 months on and off. And actually, the idea was to completely move the whole production to America. And then that all fell through because he came back again. But the idea was that. So I went off to America, and we just worked together very closely. So we had an edit going on in London, and we were obviously in California, so there's an 8-hour difference. So we'd get up very early in the morning. Louis would come to my house in Los Angeles for breakfast, and I'd have my team all living together, and then we'd be Skyping back to London, and then we'd be on shoots where we'd be in the back of a car on the way to a shoot, but we'd be watching a cut in the back seat on a laptop. So we basically, it was pretty full throttle, and doing multiple things at the same time for a variety of reasons. We were filming 3 docs at the same time ultimately. And I just think we just worked well together. And I think sometimes that happens, right? And for me, it was, well, actually, I really enjoy this. And I was being offered other jobs elsewhere. And I just thought, well, at the moment, I can kind of work on pretty much any program I want with Louis on it, and subject matter, which he's pretty much able to do anything as long as he wants to do it. And so it felt...
Well, that's an incredible privilege, isn't it, as both as a presenter and a program maker, to be able to investigate whatever program, whatever content you deem exciting and interesting. I mean, that's quite amazing to be given that license, and to be able to develop it and then probably make it if it looks good is amazing. Why would you give that opportunity up?
Exactly, and you know, it's not that he could do anything he wants, but he's when we discuss ideas and we discuss ideas between ourselves and with the general team, he just has a kind of series of things which he goes through in his head. So by the time you talk to the commissioners about it anyway, he knows why he's approaching a subject. So, and often the subjects we approach seem quite straightforward, but actually it's gone through, he's always kind of gone through in his head, what can I bring to this subject? What about this is interesting to me? And so you watch them and they seem quite simple, but we've already really interrogated every aspect of it. And there's loads of ideas which you'd think would be really good ideas for Louis, which he's like, I don't really want to do that because an obdoc would be better, or I don't want to do this because I wouldn't be needed that much to be around. Or sometimes he's just not that interested in the subject. And so kind of how I see my job now is harnessing his enthusiasm for certain subjects. And so sometimes when we did a program called The Night in Question, which is about people accused of rape in America. And when he was really kind of into this subject area and he'd been reading books around it, and I just thought, I don't know if this is a makeable program. I just don't know how we can possibly do it. But we decided to go for it, and it would take a long time. And as long as we made other programs along the way to keep our schedule up, we're allowed one every so often to be a bit of a shot in the dark, and we hope we can make them. If that makes sense. That was a bit rambly, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it does, I think. I was wondering actually, for both of you, do you find that both Stacey and Louis have to try very hard not to come to a subject with a preconceived idea or opinion of it? Because obviously the although you structure it, you want them to be coming to it with sort of their eyes wide open. I think Louis certainly does that very well. Perhaps Stacey has more of a kind of I'm on a mission too. I don't know. Do you have to make sure that you're kind of going in, although with all the information you can possibly have, but with a real blank canvas in terms of the way that they think, in order for their opinions to be able to be changed authentically during the course of the film?
Well, with Stacey, I think it depends on the type of the program. So with Stacey's, they were investigative, and her at the time, early on in her career, I guess her USP was her reactions to stuff. And but no, she doesn't have a preconceived idea. She's really good, like she's just a naturally inquisitive person. And so I think as a director, it's about telling the presenter, someone like that, enough so that she's not walking in blind. But I want a reaction, because like Arron was saying, the difference of doing obs docs when you don't have a presenter and when you do have a presenter is that the audience can see their reaction to what is happening or what that person is saying, whereas when you're behind the camera you don't get that. It's a lot of effort on the contributor. And so Stacey's reactions were part of the narrative. It wasn't about making her look this reactive person. It's about the narrative. This is an important issue or an important thing that this person's gone through, and she's reacting to that. So that's what I did with her, is make sure I was always putting her in situations where I would get some sort of reaction. And I think with reporters, or presenters, if they do have a preconceived idea at the top, then you're trying to challenge it and see what their journey is. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it, actually, that you need to challenge it so that they're not coming in with one way of thinking.
I think also, I was just about to say, Joyce makes just a good point, because I think sometimes there are people who think, you know, you can kind of wheel anyone out in front of a TV camera. And there's a history of people who they've tried to do that with, and they just don't last long. And it boils down to, you do have to have that person on camera who is naturally inquisitive. And there are so many people who aren't. And if you're in a room and nothing is happening, that scene can completely die unless your on-screen talent is naturally inquisitive. And I'm sure Stacey's the same. Like, if something is not happening, Louis will prod around until he can either something does, or someone reacts, or something, or makes something happen. And that's why the collaboration is so good, because actually you don't want to be kind of moving your presenters around the room and telling them what to do.
That's right. Because she trusts me everyone I've worked with, they trust me and they know that we're speaking to that person for a reason. So that person is maybe shy, difficult, you know, got camera. So that yeah, exactly. They do have to have the talent. They really do, you know, and we as directors, we've put months in before we get on location. So we know more than them initially. But they've got something that we don't have, and as you're shooting, they're sort of piecing it together, and we're watching them piecing it together, and that's why it works, I think, personally.
Anyone who's watching, guys, we'd love to hear questions from you. We're probably going to have another sort of 10 more minutes of chatting, so if you've got any burning questions about how the process works, or you know, how to get the best out of on-screen presenters, we would love to hear them. So just comment in the Facebook box below the video. And then I wanted to be able to talk about the edit. I'm intrigued about that. How obviously you've done so much to prep together, and then collaboration on the shoot. How does it work in the edit?
Well, initially when I was working with Stacey, I suppose there wasn't much collaboration in the edit. I would always show her a rough cut. But obviously later on, much more input. But I would imagine with Louis, it's a lot more input.
Yeah, I'd say like Louis, he's an executive producer really, and kind of co-director, I suppose, in some ways. So he will tend to come into the edit around week 3 or 4, and he will watch assemblies for kind of 3 or 4 hours. And so when I work with directors and editors now, I kind of make it kind of clear that actually this is going to be a relationship where you're all together, and it's going to be a process, right? So it's a process where everyone talks about it, and you gradually try and make things work. And the vast majority of people enjoy that process. I think it's great. I love kind of going to the edit and everyone's sitting around talking. They're really interesting sessions.
Yeah, so I think that's right. Same with all my reporters, once we get to week 4, I want them to see the rough cut. I want to know, because it's them in front of the camera. It's their reputation, not mine. In the industry, it's mine, but in the world, it's theirs. And I think they have to be happy with it. And I value their input.
I just had a question.
Oh, sorry, go for it.
So Alice Wiley, hello Alice, thank you for watching. She's asking if you guys have ever worked with brand new talent, and if you would have any tips about how to work with them, how to make them feel comfortable and get the best performance.
Well, yeah, I have, and I think it's quite difficult, because sometimes they compare themselves to Louis and Stacey, and Louis and Stacey have not only got a natural talent, but they've taken years to get to where they are. So I think it's really, I think it's harder for new talent. I think the pressure is quite high on them, but you have to, I don't know, it's a difficult one to answer, because I think what I would say is that, like Arron said, you can't just turn up. I'm talking to the new talent now, not the directors, but you can't just turn up and expect it to all happen. You've got to work hard. And I think as presenter, reporter, if you don't do the work as well, especially on location, prep, really know what you do, then I think it shows on camera. And I think the best director and the best producer in the world is not going to make them shine. Sorry.
I think the other thing, I've never worked with new talent actually, which is quite good, because maybe I wouldn't know what to do. I think one of the things that I've heard from talking to other people, I think there's a tendency, and this is just normal people's conversation, that when you're going into a world and discussing a subject, you kind of want to tell people what you already know, right? And I think actually that would be the big thing for me, which is you don't have to go in there and say, well, I've heard this, this, and this. It's starting from fresh, ask the kind of quite direct questions and get them to tell you. You shouldn't be telling them what you already know.
Yeah.
Because I think actually, if you go to an interview or something, you want to meet an exec you're meeting or something and say, I've watched this program already, and I've watched this program. And actually, you kind of have to do the opposite, I think, which is to start as though you don't know everything already.
Yeah, I mean, what might help from a director's point of view is just to help the new talent think that they're just having a chat. You know, they're just having a chat. And if I'm self-shooting, I would stand back a little bit initially and just move in really gently, you know, because otherwise they just think, oh, I've got to ask the next question. And I think sometimes you can see they're not actually listening, you know, and they've missed the point, and then you have to interrupt. So I think helping the talent to be prepared and to relax.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good advice. And I also think it's very different, isn't it, depending on what you're shooting. If you're shooting an access doc with someone like a Louis or Stacey, it's a different sort of on-screen talent than someone who's going to be presenting links, and you need a performance out of on a different scale, or something where you're producing more heavily. Gemma McAllister, hi Gemma, who is a production exec. This is classic question from a product exec. How long do you generally allow to film a doc, and how long do you spend in the edit? I mean, that's probably very dependent on what you're doing, but Arron, what about a Louis doc? How long would that, if it's not the one that you're saying you kind of spend your whole year sort of dipping in and out of, how long do you allow in general?
Okay, well, it does, the caveat is that we'll do different docs in different ways, and we approach Louis on a case-by-case basis, but knowing that if one has to be very long, the next one has to be quite short. So as an example, when we were doing Altered States, we did a program called Choosing Death, which is about people choosing to end their lives using prescription medication. And that probably took about 8 months to film, whereas something like Love Without Limits, which is about polyamory in the same series, probably took about a month to film. But both probably were filmed over about 10 to 20 days. So we tend to have 10 to 20 shooting days. But Louis is kind of on the book, so we're not paying him per day per se. He's kind of just contracted overall. So we don't have those limitations, which I know at some on-screen talent it will be, you have to pay them per day, per shoot, and things like that. So yeah, 10 to 20 days I think is what we've been looking at.
And Joyce, what about? Go on, sorry, Arron, carry on.
I was just about to say, if it is in a different country, then obviously it changes, and sometimes we'll do it in one chunk of about 2 weeks. Sometimes we'll do it in 2 chunks.
And Joyce, what about for a Stacey, a typical Stacey?
Tiny, because it's current affairs, so it's tiny. So it's usually me, if I'm lucky. Well, I've always have someone like an AP, but if I'm lucky, I've got a really good producer. Started off with a cameraman, but now self-shoot. So it's just 3 of us, basically. And normally we get 14 days, including travel. And with a lot of the Stacey's, and I did a Ben Zand a few years ago on R. Kelly, and we're talking 3 states, 3 countries. I mean, we're traveling a lot, and they are really intense. It's really tight. I don't sleep. I don't eat at all, and you know, keeping calm, making sure everything's done. I mean, they are super intense. And the budgets are getting shorter and shorter. I think the shortest one I did with Stacey was an 8-day shoot in Manila, including travel. That was one location though, and I think that was a 40 minutes, but 60 minutes you usually get 14 days, and then 6 weeks in the edit. So 4 weeks, you start your viewings, and then you've got to be out that door 6 weeks. But that's why structure is so important, because you know what you're going there to do. Obviously you have to be organic and allow for things to happen naturally, but structure.
They're so intense, those shoots, aren't they?
So intense.
Know when you're on location the entire time, and even if the rest of the team can down tools and drink a glass of wine, certainly for the director your head is elsewhere. I know that, having been there. And you know, also if you're self-shooting, you're then, you know, charging everything, checking everything. It's just, yeah, your brain never switches off.
But one thing I'll say about the people that I've worked with, the really great people that I've worked with, is they don't down tools either. So when we finish shooting, we'll all eat together. We talk about what we shot. We know what we have to do tomorrow, and then we go to bed, and then we get up and we do it all over again. and that, and because we know it's only 2 weeks, and the thing is, you just want to make the best film possible.
Claire Hicks is asking us whether you have any advice for giving notes or feedback to talent. That's an interesting question. How do you handle that if you have an opinion on something that they've done, or you want them to improve something, or you want to say that something worked really well? How do you approach that?
From my point of view, like I say, the setup is quite collaborative, and because Louis is often in the room, like day to day, it's a constant conversation. So there's notes coming from different people, right? So I'll have notes and Louis will have notes, but we'll often try and do it all together. So we're all talking through the same things. And you know, me and Louis, so Louis writes his script from scratch. So which might be a bit different to how Stacey does it, but the way we do the edit is that we basically get the scenes working for the film, and then we discuss the order of the scenes, but there doesn't tend to be any guide com, no guide VO, and Louis will try and get it in his head, and he'll start to write from scratch.
Wow, that's great.
And it's a slightly different way of working. And we will talk about his script. So right at the end, me and him will sit through and go line by line, but he's a good writer. Right, he's got a better grasp of the English language than I do, so there's often not that many notes from me.
I think for me, the only guidance I will give is on location. You know, trying to get the best out of who Stacey or the reporter that I'm working with. So it's all in my head, and like sometimes they might say something on a piece to camera, and then I'll say, you need to say that to them. So we'll go back and do that to them. But because there's trust, it's not really like giving notes. I think I have worked with other reporters and presenters who are an absolute nightmare. And I think this has to be discussed. And it's not my job in the edit to help. It's an executive producer's job. And often they're afraid to do it. And we all know who these nightmare presenters are. They are bullies. They editorially jeopardize the film. They make life hell for everybody, and they are protected. And I won't work with them anymore because I've had my fair share of those. But I think that needs to be addressed. Sorry, but it does.
Are you going to name names, Joyce?
No, I'm not. We all know who they are. We all know who they are. You know, and that's why, you know, that's why I love working with Stacey, because she's not like that at all. She is so humble. It's unbelievable. She's so polite with everybody. She's telling me sometimes, Joyce, you know, you're being a bit blunt now. You need to be a bit nicer. So she's and funny. You know, off when we switch, you know, we're light-hearted because we're dealing with really difficult subjects. So I want the best for her. She wants the best for the film, and that's why it's a wonderful collaboration. And when you've got someone who doesn't, and they won't take any guidance, firstly, they're shooting themselves in the foot. Secondly, they're jeopardizing editorially, not making a great film. And I think, what's the point? Why are we protecting them?
Yeah, I think, do you know, something that we're hearing more and more when we're asked to fill jobs and find great people for companies, whether it's permanent or just project. But one of the questions that freelancers are asking us more and more is, are they nice to work with? Yeah. And it's been really apparent. And it's something that we feel really strongly about. And obviously they were going off piece and not talking about on screen, but it is incredibly important to relate that to off screen as well, because a team that's not happy, a team that doesn't trust each other, a team where there is threats and worry is not going to make the best program. It's just impossible. So I can completely understand you wanting to work with the nicest people who listen and who will collaborate with you. It's a no-brainer.
Yes, but with talent, I think the point I'd like to make is that if I treated my team the way some talent treat me and other people, I wouldn't work. So why are they working in an industry, especially an industry like the BBC, who should be setting an example? Why are they protecting them? And they shouldn't be protecting them. That is unacceptable. Bullies in the workplace are unacceptable, and a lot of them are talent.
Good to know. I'd like to know who they are, but I get your point. Let's take one more question, I think, and then we'll wrap up. So Joyce, you touched on this briefly earlier, but Emma Morgan has asked if you have ever experienced talent challenge your judgment when it comes to directing them or whatever you're shooting, and what do you do about that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, of course, and I want them to, you know, because they're not puppets. I want them to have a voice. So I want to be challenged, and if I've got a producer, a good producer, then we just have a chat about it, you know, and the producer's there as well to kind of back up why we have to do that scene or why we have to ask that question. And if they really don't want to do it, then I don't let them do it, you know, but they've got to, like I've got to justify why I want them to do it, they've got to justify why they don't want to do it. And I think that's fair.
Arron, have you and Louis ever come to blows on anything?
We've not come to blows. He's a bit taller than me. I think we kind of disagree all, you know, you disagree all the time, don't you? It's the same as what Joyce says. I'm kind of aware with Louis. He's really experienced. He's done loads of programs. He's got really good instincts. But if I feel really strongly about something, I'll raise it and we'll discuss it. And, you know, we will just generally chat about it and come to a decision. I mean, I think it's the same thing. If he really doesn't want to do something, or if he really wants to do something, it's like it's his name at the top of the program.
I agree.
And so that's fine, really. I mean, I think actually we should all have loads of experience of butting heads or disagreeing with people in this industry. And to kind of echo Joyce's previous points, it's about doing it in a kind of professional manner, which isn't kind of undermining or bullying or, you know, difficult to work with.
And Joyce, you've had some people say, yes, what an important point that was about on-screen people being bullies. There's a lot of pressure when you're dealing with difficult talent, and there isn't always the support for the director. Yeah,
I think that goes for that goes for the whole industry, though, doesn't it? I mean, I think we've all experienced people. I've definitely worked with people who I would not want to work with again. There are people with reputations who I would probably steer clear from. And actually, there's a lot. I don't, personally speaking, I think lots of people have different ways of working. I think there's a lot of people who think actually creating a bit of butting heads and tension helps the creative process. Personally speaking, in the way I like the teams to run who I work with, I kind of like a kind of nice collaborative environment, which is quite easygoing. I kind of like want to work with people who I want to spend lots of time with, because ultimately that's what we're going to end up doing.
You're going to get the best out of people if people are encouraged to give their best and space to give their best, and that otherwise, if you're not going to get the best out of people.
Great. Well, thank you, guys. I think all that is really, it's just so nice to talk about it, and it's also really nice to hear people speak so sort of transparently and openly about working with some really big names. I think, you know, it's fascinating dinner party chat, really, isn't it? And as well as for all the people that follow us on Talented People to be able to ask what they want to do, ask what they want to ask, and sort of get the behind the scenes view. I know some of the people who've been commenting haven't worked on series or documentaries with presenters before, so this has been really interesting for them to hear how you do it. And obviously all this is, you know, subjective and your guys' view and how it works very differently with people that you have personally worked with. But I think sort of the main themes that have come up, I've just scribbled down, was being super prepared, you know, really rigorously interrogating your subject matter and, you know, chewing it around and coming up with all the different scenarios and having structure. Joyce, big fan of structure. Collaboration, it sounds like a no-brainer, but you've explained it really well, in that if you can't collaborate, then there won't be that working relationship between you both, and you won't see that on screen either. And trusting each other's instincts, trusting your presenter when they're saying, I don't want to do this because of XYZ, but then them trusting you, saying, I need you to push on with this line of questioning because of XYZ. Any more pearls of wisdom before we say?
I'd like to kind of just make the point that I know when I was a director, I probably my my kind of personal plans were the same as what many people's plans are. It's like, I want to be this director and I want to be this auteur and make these wonderful programs, and it's going to say directed by Arron Fellows underneath, and it's going to be amazing. And I think there's people who are reluctant to work with on-screen talent, and actually it's a really one, you might really fall in love with it, which is something that I've done, but actually it's really useful in terms of storytelling and all of those things that you need in your kind of standard ob docs. I would say don't kind of dismiss talent-led presenters because you want to be this directorial kind of auteur type figure. Actually, you'll probably learn quite a lot, and you will find that you can really get into the meat and the kind of the heart of subject matter quite quickly, and it's quite a satisfying experience, I think.
Yeah, and I would like to add that like working with someone like Stacey, who now is, you know, she's a big name now. She always had a good following, but what Stacey remembers and what we all need to remember is it's not about them, it's about the people that they're speaking to and the subject that we're covering. And if they make it more about them, then that's not what we're doing. We're here to shine a light on a subject, and that's what our job is, you know. We're shining a light.
They cannot bring the ego, basically.
No, I mean, no, they can't. And the ones that I love working with, they don't.
Oh, well, great. Thank you, guys. I'm hoping this has been helpful for everybody. It seems to have been. Lots of you have been commenting and liking, so thank you so much for joining us. God, I feel a bit like a chat show host, and I didn't mean to ever be one of those, but it's just really lovely.
I'm not wearing pajamas. The more I see myself on this screen, it looks like I'm wearing a pajama top, and then I've got this kind of isolation beard. I just look kind of like I've been locked up for about 25 years.
Why do you need isolation beard? That's not one of the health and safety, you know, restrictions, is it, to grow a beard?
It's a sign of insecurity, I think, Kimberly, I'll be honest.
Or if Tesco run out of your favourite razor blade.
I think that's what it is, yeah. Bit of both.
Oh, well, look, everyone stay safe and well and indoors, and we'll be doing lots more of these. So if you have any suggestions about things you'd like to see, our plan is for things like making ofs of things that are on telly right now, talking to MDs and indie leaders about the current situation and also the way forward, perhaps in a development session, brainstorm, maybe remote editing. That's coming up quite a lot. People are saying how best to do that. You know, I'm new to this, it's not ideal. You know, has anybody got any tips and advice about how we do that? So thank you all for watching, and stick to the Talented People social media, and you'll see what else we're doing next. So thank you, Arron Fellows and Joyce Trozzo, for joining us, and we will see you all soon. Stay safe and well, everyone. Go and have some lunch.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Arron. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Bye, Joyce.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye. Thank you.
See you.